And joining us now here on the Jay Stevens podcast, it is a guest that we've had on before. The last time he was on, it was in the beginning, or probably the beginning of the college basketball season. This team's college basketball season happens to be over. It was over before a lot of teams' basketball seasons were over, but they did recently hire a new basketball coach, and I wanted to come on and bring Jack Grossman back on of ESPN Louisville, and he also has the Crimson Coverage podcast where he covers IU football and basketball as well. Jack, how you doing, sir?
Man, it hasn't been over. We are firmly in the offseason in Bloomington. We've had a coaching change, the transfer portal, the whole 9 yards. It has been wild, but thanks so much for having me on Jay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, no problem. Firmly in the offseason. I could have made some more jokes earlier before bringing you in and being like, well, IU's basketball season, it was over before it actually ended because they weren't really good this year.
No, they were not.
IU basketball, Jack, go ahead. How did you evaluate the season?
I mean, is there any other way to describe it? I mean, they're sitting there. They manage. It's the second time in the last 2 years that there's actually been a tournament where they've managed to sweep a team that they got a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they couldn't make the field either time. They swept Michigan State a couple years back, and who actually went with the Final Four, so I would still not do that. But they swept Iowa this year. You go into the final 6 games of the season. You have Michigan State at home. At that point, was a team that had shown absolutely no signs of life, and you're like, okay, you're sitting at 12-9. If you could just beat a really, really bad Michigan State team twice, you're probably going to be in the field.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what the heck else you do and anything else. Just beat Michigan State twice.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't beat Michigan State twice. And in fact, they lost both those games, and that's why Michigan State got into the first 4, and Indiana was 12-15 as they lost 6 games in a row to end the season. They finally got to have fans at the Big Ten tournament. You know what those fans did? They booed Archie Miller and the team off the court. And I felt bad for the players. I really did. I didn't really feel bad for RJ. I mean, like you can say whatever you want. I mean, the dude got fired and he got a $10 million buyout. I'm not going to feel bad for him.
Right.
I mean, that's just where I'm at. So it was time to make a move. I had been kind of adamant about Archie Miller was not the right guy for a while now. I was very alone on those battles for a long while, but everyone caught up to me, which I'm wrong on a lot of things, but I take the victory lap when I get it, right? But But basically, it was a really disappointing season. You wasted Trace Jackson Davis for a second year in a row, and it was Archie Miller is done, and that's kind of the storyline moving forward now is everyone finally figured out that Archie Miller was not the guy for IU basketball. And we can move forward and try to figure out if Mike Woodson now is that guy.
Why were you on the train, on the path, somewhat by yourself, that Archie was not the guy for Indiana?
Well, I think the turning point started when he had Romeo Langford, who was an NBA lottery pick, Juwan Morgan, all Big Ten forward, a top 10 recruiting class, and lost 12 out of 13 games and failed to make the tournament with that roster. That was kind of like okay, if you're not making the field with those guys, I mean, I get it, the recruiting class didn't really pan out, but yeah, Romeo Langford, Juwan Morgan. You've got to be able to make the tournament when you have those 2 guys. And then for me, doing enough to get in as a 10 seed, 11 seed, maybe if there was a tournament last season, that doesn't really do much for me. I know down here in Louisville, people are doing the same thing. Chris Mack, I think it's a little bit more unfair because they were going to be like a 3 or 4 seed. They were a top 15 team all year. I think you get credit when you're that good of a team, and then the tournament gets wiped out because of the once-in-a-century pandemic. But when you're just a 10 or 11 seed and you have nothing to show for it in the other 4 years, you don't get that benefit of the doubt. And then this year, you bring back everyone from a team that would have been a quote-unquote NCAA tournament team last year other than Devontae Green, Deron Davis. You add in, some more pieces around that, and you lose 6 in a row to finish under 500 and don't make the NCAA. It's like you're Indiana basketball. 4 years, no NCAA tournaments. It's the first time since the 70s they've gone 4 years in a row without a tournament. Archie Miller became the first coach ever to not win a Big Ten title in his first 4 years, which is crazy to think about IU, what they were back in the day. And 4 out of the 5 years he was there, obviously the last year Tom Crean falls in this also. It's the first time since the 1915 that IU had 5 straight seasons without finishing above 500 in the Big Ten. So, I mean, all that just says you're not good enough to be in a job that is not what it used to be. It's not, a blue blood up there, Kentucky, Kansas, Carolina anymore, but it's still a top 10 job, and should bare minimum be an NCAA tournament team in year 4. And even then, that probably wouldn't be acceptable, but there was just no signs that showed of progress, except for recruiting, which went downhill as well at the end.
It did. I was very critical of Archie Miller. I kind of talked about that with you a little bit, maybe some stuff on Twitter as well. But Archie, for some reason, and I don't know if it was just the prestige that IU basketball has over Dayton, I don't know if it's moving 2 hours away from Dayton to Bloomington. I don't know if it's seeing the banners behind him, constantly hearing about Bob Knight. You're not Tom Crean. Mike Davis did something that you haven't done yet. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's the pressure from the parents or seeing the players or knowing I have this top recruit, or I can get this top recruit next year, or in 3 years I get this top recruit. I don't know what it was, but for some reason, something happened between Dayton and IU to where Archie Miller was not developing talent. He was not making adjustments. And I don't know if it was the coaching staff. I don't have all the answers. I'm not inside the program. I'm not inside Archie Miller's head. That's only him. So I don't know all of the ins and outs, the details that go into the transition from what happened at Dayton to what happened at IU. But somewhere along the line, Jack, something didn't continue. Something fell through the cracks, and Archie Miller was not able to put that back into his program, into his coaching style for him to be successful in Bloomington.
It just wasn't a good fit. I mean, I just think it's pretty simple. And I remember thinking when he first got hired, I thought, okay, that's who they're going with. All right. And then obviously he goes and wins the press conference, and everyone, including myself, bought into it for a little while. But there were just some core tenets that he just didn't have. He didn't really have any personality, which you can get away with when you're winning big, but he didn't win big or really win at all. So there you go, to where that really hurt him with the fans later in the tenure. He recruited well, but didn't know how to win with those recruits. He got 3 straight Mr. Basketballs. No one's ever done that before, but he didn't know what to do with those guys when he got them on campus. You said it yourself, there was no player development. That was the biggest issue I really had with him when you look at roster construction. And then they could never shoot. In basketball in 2021, 2017, 2018, whatever year you want to insert that Archie Miller was at IU, you have to be able to shoot the basketball to win games, and Indiana under Archie Miller could never do that. And sometimes it's just something incredibly simple as that of you got to put the ball in the basket. And Indiana under Archie never was good at putting the ball in the basket. They were never able to draw defenders out of the lane to free up Juwan Morgan or Romeo driving earlier in the tenure, or Trace Jackson Davis the last couple of years, to where they could actually do work on the inside, because everyone knew, hey, you can leave those guys wide open. They aren't going to beat you. And what happens? You don't make the tournament over and over again. You have pretty bad basketball. It doesn't matter how good you are defensively, even though that regressed a lot in year 4 as well. Well, if you can't put the ball in the hoop, at the end of the day, they could. I still think Archie Miller can be a good coach. I think he can go to a mid-major job and have success there. He had a lot of success at Dayton. I mean, obviously he was doing something right there, but it just became very clear that he is not the type of guy that is a good fit for a program like an Indiana or a really powerhouse traditionally a powerhouse program.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It's very hard. And before I got into this analyst or podcasting stuff or quote unquote talking head, I looked at coaches like that differently than I do now. I looked at them and said, oh, dude, you're horrible. You're trash. What are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. Get out of town. But then I look back now and I see, well, the track record. What happened at Dayton? What's not happening at Bloomington? We talk about developing of talent. That's one thing he didn't do at Indiana. I don't know why. I don't have the answers. I don't know why. I know there's been coaching changes as far as assistant coaches that people have left. Does that affect it? I don't know. I have no answers. But the one hopeful thing that the new hire, Mike Woodson, they believe and they hope that he can develop the talent that Archie Miller did not do. Jack, your initial thoughts when you heard that Mike Woodson, the 63-year-old NBA longtime assistant and head coach, is now the head man in Bloomington?
My initial thought was just disappointment. It really was. It was, and I want to be honest here. I'm not, and just to preface it, I'm not going to be like a Mike Woodson hater. I'm not going to not give him his fair chance. I absolutely am. I mean, heck, I've been doing it for the last 2.5 years of just not wanting the head coach to be the head coach. I physically just mentally cannot do that anymore. Or I gotta give the guy a chance, man. But it was disappointment because I feel like that there were guys out there, namely Chris Beard, Scott Drew, John Beilein, that you could have brought in that would have been a lot more effective and a better fit and a better person for what IU needs right now than to just go and try to hire a former Knight player, which is basically what they did. Now, I think there's bright sides to it as well, but just which we can get into. But just my initial thought was, man, they never really took a real shot at Chris Beard. They never really took a real shot at Scott Drew or even a Musselman or even an Nate Oates, who had said no, but if you throw him a bunch of money, maybe he reconsiders. But it just felt like they were kind of settling for Woodson there. I felt like the Indiana job obviously is not what it once was. It's not up there again with the blue blood levels, but it's in that second tier that's with like a Louisville, a Villanova, a Michigan State. I think it's still on par. I think you probably put Ohio State in there as well. Well, to where it's still a really, really damn good job. And to me, I think they swung and missed on Brad Stevens, which was never really going to happen.
Right.
There was the whole weird thing with Chris Holtman that I don't really know what to believe on that. But other than that, they didn't really try to go get anyone. It's like they just went, okay, we couldn't get the dream of Brad Stevens. Let's just go hire a Knight guy. And I'm like, is that really the best way to handle things? However, they have swayed me a little bit just from the fact that obviously you know him and follow him a lot closer, I'm sure, than I have. Thad Matta, bringing him on as an associate AD, I think is incredibly smart. I think that's a guy that can help Woodson, a guy who I think is a fine coach. I mean, he was 315, 365 in the NBA. That's got fired twice. Only had a winning percentage of 31% in the playoffs. So I think there's real questions there, but there are things that he does really well coaching throughout his tenure that I think can translate. Just I don't know how he can translate from the college game after being in the NBA for 30, 40 years. I mean, he hasn't been involved in college basketball since he graduated from IU, which was in 1980, which was almost 2 decades before I was born. So it's been a while, but I think bringing Thad Matta in, a guy that knows college basketball, knows the state of Indiana for both being the former Butler head coach and the former Ohio State head coach, where he came in and got guys, like Mike Conley and Greg Oden, who were, fairly good at basketball, to say the least, at least, and recruiting the state of Indiana. He knows how to run a successful program. He obviously is not physically able to do it anymore because of health issues, but he can be a liaison that I think could be really helpful to Mike Woodson. And if he's able to go get a guy like Larry Brown, who he was an assistant under with the Detroit Pistons when they won the NBA title in 2004. I think I've heard some mixed messages on that. I would absolutely love it. You're telling me you can get Larry Brown and Thad Matta to be advising Mike Woodson how to run a college program? I mean, you can get all you can just move past all Larry Brown bagman stuff in NCAA issues. Everyone does that stuff, so who the hell cares?
Yeah,
he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's literally the only guy to win an NCAA title and an NBA title. You can put him on the bench, and you can have Thad Matta in a I almost said front office role, but that's obviously not correct for college, but kind of a behind the scenes role. I think those are two guys that would be really helpful to Mike Woodson. Then you have Kenya Hunter, who is retained from the previous coaching staff, which could maybe help you try to get some of the guys that are in the transfer portal back. And hopefully he can, for IU's sake, hope to start to live up to that moniker of being a great recruiter.
Mike Woodson, man. You mentioned a couple names there: Scott Drew, John Beilein, Chris Beard, mentioned Chris Holtman, mentioned Thad Matta. When I was thinking about who would possibly be the head coach, Beard, Beilein, Beard and Drew came up, not so much John Beilein. That was almost like, to me, a last resort. Because if I'm John Beilein, of course, I'm a talking head now, so it's kind of different space. But if I had been a longtime coach and I had been gone, the last time I'd been a head coach was in the NBA, and I got away because of some things that I said that I shouldn't have said. Also, very, very hard to transfer from college to NBA at his age, and he saw that really, really quickly. The NBA players are not going to be as responsive to him and his coaching style as 18 to 22-year-old young men are. But I think John Beilein would have been an okay thing. But the thing about these older guys, you don't know how long Larry Brown's going to be there on the bench. Could it be 1 year? Could it be 2 years? You don't know. You don't know how long Mike Woodson's going to be there. Could it be 1 year? Could it be the entire 6 year? You don't know. He's a little bit older, so you have to think about that. Thad Matta, how long will he want to be in that advisory role? I don't know. Now, granted, it's going to be nice to get paid again and to be in a state, be in an area that you know, and be able to recruit. Once again, Thad Matta can be your recruiter. Hey, Jack Kiefer at Lawrence North. I got a guy here. You got this guy. I got a coach. You want to make this marriage happen? I mean, Matta did get, like you said, Mike Conley and Greg Oden. So
that was a long time ago, though.
It was a long time ago, but the connection's probably still there. Just some things that may actually go into it. The only hesitancy I see is the age. Yeah. I think Mike Woodson and IU, they'll put the right pieces around him to make him successful. I don't have a problem with the basketball side of it. Not at all. I think his basketball brain and mind, it's up there, one of the top ones. My whole thing is, how long will he be there? That's it.
And that's a great question. And I think to kind of bring the parallel to Beilein, which I would have been really happy with. You look at everywhere Beilein's been we'll use his stops in power conference teams, just West Virginia and Michigan. When he took over both those programs, they were both in really, really bad spots. Mm-hmm. And he stays at West Virginia, I think, for 5 years, and Michigan, I think, for 8 years. But you saw the track record from what he took over and what he left behind. And he left both places in so much better spots when he left that they could go. And there's another part to it. Both West Virginia and Michigan made two great hires after him in Bob Huggins and Juwan Howard, to where they could take that culture and that foundation that John Beilein had built and already won big with, and keep winning big, or in some cases possibly win even bigger, which Huggins did, making the Final Four, and I think his first or second year with West Virginia, to where you could say, yes, he's 68. He's not going to be there for more than 5, 6, 7 years. But if you could just get him to build the program up, lay a foundation, set a culture, and then the key thing would be hire the perfect guy for the next when he retires to replace him, then you're in a spot where you can win big for a long time. Mike Woodson, it's a lot of the similarities, 63 instead of 68, so a tad younger, but it's still going to be the same principle. But I think the thing is, with Beilein, it was a low-risk, high-reward hire, I feel like. With Mike Woodson, you don't have any sort of guarantee that this is going to work out. With him, it is a high-risk, low-reward hire, because even if he gets it going, he's going to retire. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of that's one of my bigger issues with the hire, is the fact that he is old. And yes, Thad Matta and Larry Brown are old also, Larry Brown especially being 80, and they won't do this forever. But you would think that just a couple of years is really all Woodson would need to really get it going, that maybe he could take the reins over himself. But for me, that's the key thing. It's a high-risk hire, and it's a low-reward hire, because if it works out, you're not set for 2 decades. You're set for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Then he retires, and then you're back in that boat of having to bet on yourself of making a great hire, which, let's just be frank, Indiana hasn't done since Bob Knight retired, or not retired, was fired. That's the right way of putting it out. I said retired. But, yeah.
Jack, man, my thought just escaped me. Give me a second. Let's go to these players that are right here. My thought's going to come back to my head here in a second. So I got players. Some played, some did not play last year. I was watching a video by Kent Sterling, and he said Parker Stewart. I never heard of Parker Stewart a day in my life, but he's like, Parker Stewart never played, and I believe Parker Stewart's never going to play in an IU uniform. Now, he said never played. He may have played like a couple of games. I don't know, but he didn't play very much. But I got names like Trace Jackson Davis, Armand Franklin, Jordan Geronimo, Al Durham, who's already committed to play at Providence, Race Thompson, Christian Lander, and Joy Brunk. Brunk last on purpose because he was hurt last year, using his COVID year to get him another medical redshirt year under his belt. Where do you see, what is the agenda? Should Mike Woodson's agenda be as far as trying to tackle that list of players, trying to retain them, or understanding and being kind of passive if they say, Coach, I want to go?
Well, we saw step one already on Tuesday night when Woodson did an interview with Don Fisher, the longtime voice of IU, where he almost practically begged to trade Jackson Davis to come back, saying, I think there was a quote of him saying that Trace doesn't have a right hand, which he isn't particularly wrong about, and that he needs to develop a jump shot, and he could really come back and really help his draft stock if he were to come back. So I think that's a different level than anyone else, just because of how dominant and how great Trace Jackson Davis has already been at IU, and I guess how much better he potentially could be if he were to actually come back. I don't think he's coming back, but credit to Woodson for trying. As far as the transfers go, there's, Armand Franklin was a very good player. I think he can still be a really good player. He'd be a player that contributes on a good team. But you're thinking about it, most of these guys, yes, it would be great to have them back, but this was the core of a team that went 12-15. I mean, it's like you would want to bring back as much of them as you can, but if they end up leaving, it's kind of like, well, it stinks, but you feel like no one's really irreplaceable other than Trace Jackson Davis, to where anyone's really that great of a talent, that great of a player, to where you really feel heartbroken if that guy leaves. Now, it would be good to get Armand Franklin back. It would be good to get Christian Lander, who's a former 5-star back. It'd be good to get Race Thompson back, but if it's not meant to be, it's just not meant to be. And I think on the other end of it, it's a two-way street now with the transfer portal. You can go get guys that may be better than some of the guys that are transferring, that could be better fits for what Mike Woodson is trying to do, which sounds like an actual modern offense, which would be a nice change for Indiana basketball from what Archie had. But you look at Texas Tech, what Chris Beard did retooling that rosters with transfers, making the Elite Eight in year 2. You look at Eric Musselman this year, retooling transfers, one of them being Justin Smith, a former IU player, who wildly, when he plays his natural position and is surrounded by shooters and a court that is actually spaced, he can actually be good. Wild theory.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I know. But he made an Elite Eight in year 2 with all transfers. Like I saw Jeff Borzello of ESPN tweeted it on Monday night. In the Baylor-Arkansas game, the top 6 scorers in the game, Baylor's Macy O.T., Gerard Butler, and Davion Mitchell, and I think it was Smith, Tate, and Moody for Arkansas, were all transfers. Like, that's where college basketball is going now. We have over 1,000 names in the transfer portal. You can get good players from the transfer portal. So I think if Mike Woodson's like, yes, it would be great to get some of those guys back, but it's not – like when Tom Crean took over and he had 3-4 scholarship players and you literally had to do a slow build up. It's not like that anymore because of the one-time transfer, because of immediate eligibility. You can go and get 5-6 transfers in a year. And you can be really competitive in year 1. And heck, again, Elite Eight, Final Fours, year 2, under these guys. Beard made a title game in year 3 with a bunch of transfers. So I don't think it's that big of a deal that there's so many people in the transfer portal.
I'm going to throw an idea at you that I'm going to be tackling on Locked On Buckeyes, I think tomorrow on Friday. So I'm not really sure. This is being recorded on Wednesday evening, dropping on Thursday. I'm not sure the proper angle, which angle I'm going to take with this subject, but I'm interested to hear what you think. Is it easier to build? No, for long-term success. Should a coach, under your analysis, prepare and build a team via 2 to 3 year projects via high school recruits, or 1-year transfers? Which one is best for long-term success?
I've gone back and forth on this a lot for many years, but for me, I see it now as I think the transfer market is the way to go these days. That's kind of the hot new thing that everyone does. And I think my argument is, the whole argument of get old, stay old is a very real thing. But also, when you get these transfers, whether it be for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, you have a clear expiration date of this is the latest that this guy will be on the team. This is how long he will stay here unless he explodes and goes to the NBA, which if that happens, then something really good happened for your team, so you can live with that. But when you bring in these freshmen that are, as you said, 2, 3, 4 year projects, and you never know when they might just get up and leave. Because of the fact that these guys, don't want to sit and wait for their turn like, they did in the old days. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's just the reality of it. They want to play right away. If they don't get that, even if they're developing, they say, bleep this, I'm going to tell her I can play right now. So to where you're doing all the hard work, honestly, and then another coach gets to bear the fruit of the labor. I mean, this has long been an argument with mid-major coaches versus high major. You see it with high majors too now. It happens with everyone. Hey, Duke's losing transfers. Deron Sharp from North Carolina transferred. Rocket Watts at Michigan State transferred. So you're seeing this for all phases of college basketball, to where I'm saying I would rather take the transfer where I know he's going to be here for X amount of years and I can plan it out that way, instead of taking this freshman who I have to go do all this work to develop, and he can leave whatever the heck he wants to. So for me, I really do think the transfer portal is the future. The transfer market is the future. We'll see if they find some sort of way to regulate it, or if it just naturally dies down eventually and people just kind of get over the new and fun craze that is transferring. But right now, I think that's a way more viable way to build rosters than just trying to build through freshmen. I'm not saying freshmen don't have a place also. Obviously, high school recruiting is always going to be very important, and every team has that aspect in it as well. But I think you're going to see a shift, and we're already seeing the shift of teams, instead of building mainly through high school recruiting and freshmen and then filling in holes with transfers, to they're going to fill mainly with transfers and just try to get a couple freshmen to work with on the side.
Last question, Jack. Do you find that going the transfer route for a head coach is the harder of the two options?
That's a really tough one. I really haven't thought about it. There's challenges anyway you try to win.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a really good question.
These are things that have been going through my mind as I prepare for this show on Friday. So I'm just throwing stuff at you that I've been thinking about. I have 2 or 3 weeks under my belt in my brain. I know it's just coming right at you very hot.
Right? No, I love it. I think it depends on the coach. I mean, a guy like, John Calipari at Kentucky, who has built so much on the one and done and all that it's an adjustment for him to go get Kellen Grady from Davidson, who they just got a couple days ago, or something along those lines, to where it's not really necessarily NBA talent you're dealing with, but in his case, it's still, 1 or 2 year short spurts type of things. A guy like Tom Izzo might have a harder time doing that because he's used to building teams 3-4 years,
right? And
now he's getting more turnover. I think just depends on the coach and their taste, because a guy like Musselman or a guy like especially Chris Beard are proven you can definitely win. Scott Drew as well. You can win with transfers, and you can win big with transfers. Gonzaga, Andrew Nemhard, Florida transfer. I mean, UCLA, Johnny Juzang, Kentucky transfer. But people are mad that Calipari ran him off the team. It's been a fun talking point down here. But transfers are going, and they're winning big, to where I don't know if it's necessarily easier or harder, but that is definitely the new hot thing to do.
Jack Grossman, this has been fun, man. A lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again. Hopefully not in the summer for anything bad. But preparing for the IU football season. Jack, if you could, very quickly, let people know where they can connect with you via social media, listen to the radio shows you're on, and also listen to the podcast as well.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jack Grossman 97. My main thing with ESPN Louisville, which is who I work for, I guess on airwise, is the Crimson Coverage podcast, which comes out weekly, talking everything IU football, IU basketball. We have a lot of fun with that. Then obviously ESPN Louisville has programming Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. through 7 p.m. And yeah, I mean, I'm usually on post-game shows and stuff like that, but obviously that time of the year is over now. So a little bit of the off season, but when we ramp back up, I'll be doing IU football and basketball pre and post-game shows yet again, which are always an absolute blast. Hearing people go crazy, whether they win or lose, it's always a great time. But yes, ESPNLouisville.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Jack Grossman 97.
Jack Grossman, my man. This has been fun. One of the connections that I have made with Ben Stevens of Locked on Big Ten. I do stuff for Locked on Podcast Network. And anytime Ben refers a guest to me, they always bring it every single time. Jack, once again, second time here on the podcast, brought it once again. Jack Grossman, thank you once again for coming on here, the Jay Stevens Podcast.
I appreciate it, Jay. Anytime, man.